Welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast, where today's thought leaders discuss how they're using the latest social media strategies and technologies in marketing, sales, customer service, and HR. Get ready to be inspired as our guests contribute to your digital transformation through their stories, knowledge, and insights into what works in today's digitally connected world. And now, here's Bernie Borges, your host of the Social Business Engine podcast.
Hey there! Welcome to episode 235. This is Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso and host of the Social Business Engine podcast. Hey, thanks for listening. And hey, Happy New Year! Hey, my guest on this episode is Shari Levitin, Global Sales Leader and CEO of the Levitin Group. Now, on this episode, Shari and I discuss why many sales reps aren't making their numbers. The truth is that many just don't know how to build trust with their buyers. Simply stated, many reps need to re-humanize the sales process. In other words, as Shari says, they need to do everything that Alexa can't do. Now, Shari explains what she means by the call method. Now, that's an acronym with 4 steps that she explains thoroughly in this episode. I'll give you a hint. It's all about rehumanizing the sales process. We begin our conversation, in fact, with the why. Like, why is it so important to even give this topic attention in modern selling? Now, if you're thinking that you have sales reps or there are just sales reps in your organization that can benefit from learning how to rehumanize their sales process, then don't go anywhere. In fact, you can be prepared to be both inspired and energized by Shari Levitin. Now, hey, this episode is sponsored by Frost & Sullivan's Sales Team Alpine Retreat. I always have to say that slowly because it's a bit of a tongue twister for me. In fact, the acronym is STAR. Now, this event is taking place February 11th through the 13th here in 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Beautiful location. Now, you can see Shari Levitin speak at this amazing event, and you're going to hear more about it in the mid-roll message. Now, most of my listeners, well, not most, a little more than half of my listeners are downloading each episode within the first 48 hours. So that means that if you're in that group, you've got a little over a month before this event. So check it out. And even if you're just a couple of weeks away from the event, make sure you check out that event. And again, you can check out our show notes for more information about that, and you'll hear more about it a little bit later on. So with that, let's get to my conversation with Shari Levitin, Global Sales Leader and CEO of the Levitin Group. Shari, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Thank you, Bernie. I love talking to you, so this is going to be fun.
Absolutely. Likewise. Back at you, Shari. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I always enjoy every conversation that we have, and we are here to talk about something that is very near and dear to me. I think a lot of people recognize that things have been changing in the world of sales, and you are keynoting at the Frost & Sullivan Mind Exchange event in February, the Sales Team Alpine Retreat, on this topic. And the topic is rehumanizing the sales process. So, Shari, I'd like to begin with asking you, why is this an important topic that we need to be paying attention to?
Well, it's not only an important topic, it's my favorite topic. And really, it's important. Probably the biggest trend in business today, any business, not just sales, any industry, is artificial intelligence. It's transforming industries, and from tech to finance to even fashion. And when you look at sales in particular, the numbers show 21% of companies are currently leveraging AI, but that number is growing exponentially. AI is the fastest growing skill on LinkedIn, for example. And the benefits to salespeople are extraordinary because by leveraging AI technologies, it's reported you can get 50% more leads. However, as technology, as AI grows, as all technology usage grows, according to Sherry Turkle, who wrote Reclaiming the Conversation, our empathy has dropped by 40%.
Really?
Right? And so empathy is the most important skill for a salesperson. It's part of building trust. So now more than ever, we get excited about these shiny things about AI. It's great. It's exciting. But what I'm seeing and what the sales industry is seeing is, particularly with new hires, they don't know how to build empathy. They don't know how to build trust. And so it's probably the reason why only, most salespeople are missing their quota.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, I would imagine that, and I'm not going to ask you to give away everything that's in your book, Heart and Sell, but I would imagine that that's a big part of what you discuss in your book, Heart and Sell.
Yeah, it really is. The 10 universal truths in my book, Heart and Sell, we focus on not only what to say, sales tactics, but who to be. So there's 5 truths that are about, sales tactics and skills, but there's 5 that are more those soft skills. It's about empathy, about integrity, about having a growth mindset. And you really need both. And I feel very strongly that going forward, if you had to pick one, I would pick the empathy and the kindness and the agility. But if you have both, that's where you're going to really shine. We need to find salespeople that have both.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because we are living in such a fast-paced society, a fast-paced economic environment where it's all about, closing deals. It's about doing things fast, everything fast, fast, fast.
Right.
And you opened this discussion by highlighting the fact that AI has become so prolific in business and sales and marketing, et cetera. But yet you're saying it's really important for salespeople to have these soft skills, empathy and kindness. So what are you experiencing in the marketplace as you deliver that message? How are sales leaders receiving that message?
Oh, it's overwhelming. They'll say, this is exactly what we need. We have these new salespeople right out of school. And I mean, think about it. I've got a 14-year-old, and I'm sure a lot of people listening have children. I see it in my own son. My husband and I always say to him, Tyler, eyes, look at us. Mm-hmm. You see them glued to their phones. Right. And I've got to think, and they're not answering the phone. They only use it as a texting device, right? And to play video games and everything else. And I really believe that particularly first generation smartphone users, not only is empathy down because they're not talking. If they get a text and they don't want to answer it, they can avoid conflict, right? So, usually back in, when I was selling in the very beginning, if we had an uncomfortable conversation, we couldn't avoid it like we can now. I couldn't just send an emoji, with a sad face, right? I had to actually deal with the issue. And so you've got the 2 most important issues in sales, our ability to show that we care, to listen, to find out what's important to the customer, to build trust, and then the ability to disagree, right? The ability to overcome objections. And I really think, Bernie, that it's resonating with people because the ability not to disagree is what I believe is dividing our country. So it's bigger than sales. It's, we can't respectfully disagree. And I go crazy on this, but if you think about it, our time on the internet, whether it's reading the paper or the algorithms of social media, they reinforce our own belief systems, right? We get these algorithms that say, you like this candidate, you'll like this too. You like this, you'll like this too. And so we're not used to dealing with real human beings who have a difference of opinion. And I think it's shocking, and it definitely is taking its toll in sales.
Yeah, what you mentioned earlier that fewer salespeople are making quota. That's one of the things that we allude to. As you know, Tamara Shank was recently on our podcast, and at CSO Insights, they published an annual report, which includes quota attainment. And I can't wait to see what it's going to be for 2018, because for 2017, it was 53%, which was a steady decline from 63% 5 years ago. In other words, it's been on the decline for the last 5 years. So where I'd like to take you next in our conversation is I'd like you to comment on hiring practices as it relates to humanizing. What advice are you giving sales leaders on how they hire salespeople?
Well, I love to, when we talk about hiring, there's a great lens with which we can look at this. David Brooks has a terrific book called Character. For anyone who hasn't read it, maybe we can put it in the show notes, Bernie. But
okay.
Right at the beginning of the book, and this really affected me, he said there's 2 types of virtues. There's resume virtues, your skills, and there's eulogy virtues, right? What people will say about you at your funeral. And that really affected me because, of course, resume virtues are important. They're critical. I alluded to this at the beginning. There are those virtues like strategic thinking, virtues like drive, and what you've done, your experience. I've done X, Y, and Z. But eulogy virtues, are virtues such as kindness, integrity, curiosity, having a growth mindset. And I think as managers and leaders look to candidates they want to hire, you really need to look at that other side of the equation, the eulogy side of the equation, because experience matters. But I think one of the most important talents we can look at is, does that person have a growth mindset? Are they willing to learn? Are they coachable? Because if they're not coachable, as new technologies come in and new ways of viewing situations show up, are the reps going to be agile enough to take that leap and learn a new skill, learn a new way to communicate with customers? And if they don't have that, they're not going to make it. So I would say coachability is really important. Drive, do they have that hustle, to make those calls? Do they have the tenacity to work a little harder? And I hear with a lot of young people, they don't always have that. They don't have the motivation. And do you have managers that can bring that out in people? So that's really, really important. Curiosity. If a rep doesn't have genuine curiosity, they're going to go through, for example, scripts, discovery questions, and they don't really care. They don't really have that empathy. So those are the skills that I think we need to look for. Experience is important, but those eulogy virtues are what is going to get companies ahead as we go into 2019.
That's fascinating. So where my mind is going next on this very topic is, should a sales leader be looking across his or her sales organization and be thinking about ways to kind of amp up the humanization factor? Or should they be thinking about maybe bringing in new talent that has this humanized approach? Or is it perhaps, a mix of the two? What's your guidance on that?
It really always starts with the leadership, right? I think we have to look at who our leadership is. And I just said on a video for LinkedIn that coaching is going to be a real trend in sales in 2019 and beyond. Good friend of mine, Rob Jepson, who has a company, Xvoy, and I don't know if you've heard of them. He's got a phenomenal coaching platform. And I think coaching platforms are going to be very critical as we go forward, because training is great for reps and hiring the right people. But what really moves the needle is, do your coaches, do your managers take the time to coach their reps one-on-one?
Right.
And I do believe you can coach empathy. Now you're born with a certain amount of it, but you can increase empathy. But again, it's the coach, the manager, the leader that needs to lead by example. So I always say what happens in the training and coaching process is duplicated by your salespeople in the sales process. So it really starts with the leadership. And if the leadership, if they're empathetic, if they're really connecting to their reps, finding out what motivates them and not just saying, hey, you didn't hit quota. You got to increase by 20%. We got to find out what drives the rep at their core. Why are they here? Why do they do what they do? Otherwise, they're not going to have the drive.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to have that curiosity.
Right. I've always said, Shari, that when it comes to training, because as you know, you're an advisor with Vengreso, full disclosure to my listener on that. So you know all about us. And so we do training and coaching as well. And I've always said, coaching is where the magic happens. Absolutely. It is so powerful. I couldn't agree with you more. But anyway, I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole on that, because I can easily just talk an hour on that, because my brain is going to kind of where I want to go next in this conversation. So what I'm interested in knowing is, how do you assess, how does a sales leader assess, back to the stat from CSO Insights, only about half of salespeople are making a quota. So how much of that is due to this lack of humanization? Because there's so many other factors in sales success, right? So how does a sales leader determine, it's because we don't have a humanized sales force, or is it because we're not making enough calls, or we're not closing properly? There's so many factors. So what's the weight, if you will, on humanization in a sales team on their overall success?
Yeah, that is such a great question. This brings me back to a story real quick. When I first started in sales, I had a great mentor. And okay, so Bernie, this is going back, more time than I'd like to admit, maybe 20, 25 years ago.
I know how that goes.
But I remember it was right about this time. It was before New Year. And he says, so Shari, what's your goal for the new year? And I said, I'm going to make $100,000. So now, this is 25, 30 years ago, right? So that was a lot of money. And he looks at me and he says, well, what did you make last year? I said, oh, I made $27,000. How about the year before? And I think it was, less than that and less than that. And I remember he said to me, there's only two ways that you can make more income: more activity or more skill at those activities. There's really only two ways. Now, he also in that same conversation told me that I needed to give up my ego in order to make it because he said there's good ego and bad ego. I never forgot that. He said, good ego gives you the ability to claim greatness, to say, I'm going to be number one. I'm going to make $100,000. Bad ego makes you blame external factors for your lack of success. I never forgot that. And he said, you've got to take full responsibility. But really what he was telling me is there's only two things you can do. You can have more activities. You can make more client calls, get more referrals. Or once you get those customers, you can be more skilled at moving them through that pipeline. So the answer is it depends, because the activities are important. And sometimes with a rep, it's just, hey, you need to make more calls, or, hey, it might just mean you need to make more calls, but very often it's you need to make better calls. So I think it's a little bit of both, and it depends. If the sales cycle is too long, for example, we probably need to look at our discovery process, at our closing skills. So you've really got to have both, and it depends on the rep.
Okay. And you feel that if the lack of those skills are in place, you can always do skills training, but if a lack of the humanize factor, which is the theme of this discussion, it's the theme of what you're keynoting on at the Frost and Sullivan event in February. If the lack of humanization is not there, is that something that's quote unquote fixable, or is that something that has to be replaced with new talent?
I do think it's fixable if the salesperson has the drive. Now, you want to hire right in the first place, but it's absolutely fixable. I mean, I've seen that over my 25-year career. I mean, that's what we do, right? We help salespeople be better people. And when they're better people, they're better salespeople. One of the things I'm going to talk about at the conference is, look at it this way. With all the AI that we have and with technology, basically the salespeople of tomorrow and the sales leaders of tomorrow need to do everything that Alexa can't do in order to make it. Because again, Alexa's tasks are going to be automated, right? We know that 40% of all the tasks that salespeople are engaging in right now are going to be automated. So what is it that Alexa can't do? Spoiler alert, 4 things. Only a human can connect to another human. Only a human can ask questions that get to the heart, that get deeper into why people would buy their product or service. Only a human can truly listen, and not just listen to what the customer says, but listen to what they don't say. Listen to the emotion behind the words. Listen for the body language. It's that nuance that technology can't do. And only a human then can take all that information and link it to a brighter future. Only humans can look to a future and paint a brighter future. So I call that the call method. It's connect, ask, listen, and link. And that is the secret to rehumanizing the sales process. And no matter what methodology you're using, if you're using spin selling, the challenger selling, no matter what it is you're using, there's 4 things that every rep in any discipline must do. They must connect before they sell. They must ask to find out what's important to the customer. They must listen, and that's pretty hard these days to really listen, and then take that information and link it to their product or service. But you're doing all 4 things if you're successful. And that's what rehumanizing is. That connection at first, that asking the deep questions. It takes a human.
We'll be back in a moment with my conversation with Shari Levitin. Vengreso is proud to be a partner with Frost & Sullivan on the 2nd annual STAR Executive Mind Exchange sales event. If you join us at STAR February 11th through the 13th, 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, you're going to mix and mingle with forward-thinking sales executives and thought leaders. Now, Vengreso is going to be leading an interactive session on how to stand out and excel with video to drive more sales. As an event partner, we're excited to extend a $250 savings to all registrants. Just visit frost.com/Vengreso and use the discount code Mario at registration. Again, that's frost.com/Vengreso. I want to ask one final question before I get to the summary, and totally unplanned, but I know you're up for it.
Oh,
Shari.
boy.
I know you're up for it. So you and I both been around a few decades, right? So, we're not going to be more specific than that. My question, though, is in that context, since we've been around for a while, is it harder to sell today than it was when you and I were early in our careers selling, say, 20, 25, 30 years ago? Is it harder today than it was then?
Well, you're asking some real zingers, Bernie. I would say I don't know what the experience of a new rep is today. I know my experience, it's way easier. Now, that may just be because I've gotten to a place in my career where it's unconscious competence.
Mm-hmm.
I know what questions to ask. I feel that as we get older and more seasoned, we know we can be authentic. We're confident enough to say what we can't do. We're confident enough to say, you know what? No, this is not my target market. It's not going to work. Let me give you a referral, right?
Yeah.
We get confident enough to say, you know what? We don't do that, but such and such does, and they do a great job. So I think maybe the real answer to that question is, Bernie, is the more you know and the more seasoned you are and the more you perfect your own craft, the easier it looks, the easier it gets, and the more authentic it is.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because think of a profession that has been recognized for a long, long time as a craft. And that's like being a doctor, for example, right? You go to med school, you come out and do your residency, and then you've got years and years. So when you go to a doctor who's been practicing their craft for 20 years or so, they've got a lot of practice under their belt, right? And what I hear you saying is that sales professionals need to be thinking that way. They need to have that mindset of developing their craft. And it's both the skills and it's back to the theme of this conversation, being able to have that call approach, that CALL approach, which can't be done if you don't have a humanized approach. Would you agree with that overall sort of summary on that?
I do. You're right. And when somebody's really good at something, they make it look easy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Bernie, have you ever watched a sporting event or someone dance or do say, you're like, God, they make that look so easy.
Yep. Absolutely.
What do you think?
No, I think the same. Again, you said it's way easier. For me personally, I wouldn't use the word way as a descriptor or the emphasis. I would say it's easier in some ways simply because, as you know, from our time and tenure in business and in sales, we didn't always have LinkedIn at our disposal. We didn't have all the tools that are at our fingertips today that were not there, say, even as recently as 10 years ago.
But people used to actually answer the phone.
Yeah.
20 years ago, before we had caller ID and if it was long distance, they'd go, oh, it's long distance. Right. Remember that?
Yeah. So just the availability of the tools and the technologies and the insights, and even now, as you say, even some of the artificial intelligence that comes into play that can really make it easier for salespeople to do their jobs and really tee them up to have more conversations with qualified buyers, which is what salespeople want. And then that's when they need to be human and to be able to connect, ask, listen, and link to products. So I think it's a great wrap point for me to get to my summary. So what I want to do, Shari, is summarize kind of the key points that we discussed. Then I'm going to ask you to either fill in any holes, or if I jog your memory on a point you want to cover, then by all means, cover it. And then we'll ask for your contact information and bring this podcast episode to a wrap.
Awesome.
So we began our conversation with the question, why? Why is it important to rehumanize the sales process? And you pointed out that we've got so much technology that's being used now. AI is transforming industries. A lot of companies are leveraging it. It's the fastest growing skill in sales. And those organizations that are using AI are getting more leads than those that are not. However, and I think you said 50% more leads. However, you cited a data point that empathy has dropped by 40%, and that's not a good thing. And so new hires oftentimes don't have that empathy. They are very, very mired in the technology. That is an important part of your book, Heart and Sell. to really help people understand the soft skills that are needed to be an effective and successful salesperson, and with a lot of emphasis on things like empathy and kindness. And we talked about sales leaders and what they need to be thinking about when they're hiring, and they really need to be thinking about people who can show that they care, that they can listen, that they can build trust, that they can overcome objections in a way that is very conversational and human, can even respectfully disagree with prospects, again, in a conversational way that is very human. And we talked about sort of the hiring best practices. You mentioned a book by David Brooks, Character. We'll link that up in the show notes, where he points out that there's two types of virtues. And this is really eye-opening. There's the resume skills, things like accomplishments and experience. And then there's your eulogy virtues, things like kindness and curiosity and growth mindset. And, in the context of a salesperson, having a growth mindset is very important, you point out, Shari, because it really gives you some insight into their drive and whether or not they're coachable. You mentioned that coaching is something that is very, very important, very powerful, big trend in 2019, and that sales leaders need really to be coaching for empathy. We talked about success factors, and you said from your own experience that it's either about creating more activity to be successful or perhaps improving your skills in your activity. And if the drive is in place, then salespeople can become better in their skills. And that's where you call out, well, a little pun intended there. You mentioned your CALL acronym. Salespeople really should be doing the things that Alexa can't do, and that is connect with their buyer, ask questions that can provide deeper insights into their needs, listen to what they're saying, what they're not saying, what their body language is saying, and then ultimately link it to your product or service and have human conversations around that on how you can help them. And then we closed our conversation with my question, my zinger. Is it easier to sell today than it was in years past? And you said generally that it is, but perhaps it's your unconscious competence because of your tenure, your experience in the industry. But it's also the more you know, the better you become at your craft. And of course, Shari, you have probably the ultimate in the humanized approach to selling. I want to certainly shout out to my listener that if they haven't watched any of your videos, we're going to link up your website and all your content so that they can see you in action on how human you are and what a fantastic coach and author speaker you are. So a little bit of a tangent there, just kind of giving you some well-deserved kudos. But back to my summary, that's really it. Is there anything that you'd like to add to my summary?
Oh my gosh, was that powerful. That was amazing. And, I encourage salespeople to take note of what you just did in this conversation. It can be a step or, part of your sales process. I call it information confirmation. And if salespeople could do what you just did after they've done their discovery, their needs analysis, whatever you call it, repeat back to the customer what they said. Oh my God, the trust and credibility go through the roof.
Yeah.
You can use that concept. Let's say that you've done a great demo or, whatever it is you're selling. And then you get on a second phone call with a different stakeholder, whatever it is, and say, earlier we talked about boom, 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 boom. Did I leave anything out? The customer's going to think you're a genius.
Yeah.
Because you just repeated their problems, what they said. So Bernie, that was quite impressive.
Well, good. Thank you. The other thing that it does is it even jogs the memory on the customer's part, because while you're summarizing what he or she said, it can easily remind them of something else that they want to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it keeps them engaged and it lets them know, getting to the L and listen, that you care enough to really listen to what's important to them.
Exactly. Great point. Great point. Well, Shari, I can talk to you for hours about this and just about any topic. So we've got to end it here. Where can we send my listener to connect with you online, learn more about what you've got going on your book writing and speaking and content producing circuit?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can first and foremost connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a video probably about at least once a week, a training video. If you're interested in keynotes or seminars, it's just Shari, Shari, at ShariLevitin.com. I also have a YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitter. So
fantastic. I also want to encourage my listener, if you or someone you know and love is in sales leadership come see Shari in action keynote at the Frost & Sullivan Mind Exchange event, the Sales Team Alpine Retreat, February 11th through 13th, 2013 in beautiful Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Shari will be speaking on this very topic, and I can assure you we didn't cover everything that Shari's going to be talking about in her keynote, so come check it out.
And that conference, I got to say, is packed with terrific content, interesting people. That's why I can't wait to come back. I love how Frost & Sullivan puts on an event.
Couldn't agree with you more. Fantastic. Well, Shari, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you there.
Me too, Bernie. Can't wait.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Shari Levitin, Global Sales Leader and CEO of the Levitin Group. You know, my big takeaway from my conversation with Shari is affirmation that today's customers are overloaded. They're overwhelmed with information and to-dos and projects. In fact, time is the new currency. And you know what? We're all broke. There's just so much information that it's just become devalued. In fact, research shows that as technology and AI increases, empathy decreases, which is the very skill that's needed by sales reps to build trust with customers. So what's the solution? Well, as Shari says, we need to re-humanize the sales process. Sales reps need to do everything that Alexa can't. And of course, Shari says, use the call method. And that stands for, as you heard, connect, ask, listen, and link. So hey, what was your takeaway from my conversation with Shari Levitin, Global Sales Leader and CEO of the Levitin Group? I want to remind you that this episode is sponsored by Frost & Sullivan's STAR event for sales leaders taking place February 11th through the 13th, 2019 in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. You can register for this event at frost.com/Vengreso, and you can use discount code MARIO at registration and save $250. Now, again, depending on when you're listening to this, you've got about a month or even just a couple of weeks before you make your arrangements. So be sure to check that out. Again, frost.com/Vengreso. I want to remind you, Vengreso has one S in it. And of course, that'll be linked up in our show notes page at our website. While you're there at our website, that is, make sure that you get subscribed, if you're not already, to both this podcast, the Social Business Engine podcast, and also our Selling with Social podcast that's hosted by Vengreso CEO Mario Martinez Jr. When you subscribe, you're going to get our newly published podcast episodes delivered to your inbox each and every week. Now, of course, both podcasts are also available on all your favorite podcast players, including iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud, and just about every other one that's out there. Now, you can follow both our podcasts on social media through @GoVengreso on Twitter, and on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, we are plain old Vengreso. Again, one S. As for me, I'm at Bernie Borges on most social media channels. I'm also one S on my last name. So hey, one more thing I want to mention. There's a big change coming to this podcast soon. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to tell you all about it in a couple of episodes. It's really, really cool. So stay tuned for that. Well, hey, that is a wrap for episode 235. I want to thank my guest once again, Shari Levitin, Global Sales Leader and CEO of the Levitin Group. This is Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso, signing off for now and wishing you continued success on your social business journey.
Thank you for listening to the Social Business Engine podcast. Be sure to tune in again next week to reconnect with Bernie Borges for more insights, inspiration, and practical advice on social business. Visit socialbusinessengine.com to catch even more content on social strategy that will rock your business and your career.